being international is sort of part of the DNA of Docpath. The gentleman who founded the organisation, Julio Oliveras, he spent many years in IBM, and because of that he worked in many different countries. He learned a lot about businesses, and he saw that as a very good background experience for gaining, international experience, understanding, working in other countries and what he can do. So that's sort of the basis of what we came from. And so he found a product that we thought had a very good opportunity worldwide. And so we started by forming partnerships very early at a worldwide stage. So providing, business to other countries around Europe and also in South America, that sort of thing was where we started. And then from there, in 2007, he acquired a company here in the US called Resolutions that was one of our partners. And so that was sort of the basis of us moving into the USA. The US market's huge. So and for the types of solutions that we provide solutions to many different types of organisations. So from our original solutions were to banks and financial organisations. And then here in the US we had Resolutions, which was a lot of manufacturing type organisations as well. So the opportunity, we saw the space in the marketplace. We saw the opportunity to, by having a US presence, it makes things a lot easier. It makes it easier to manage. And we saw a huge opportunity to, actually expand our market by being here. The way that business is structured and what happens here in the US is a little bit different to what happens in Europe. One of the things is there's not so many borders. So if you look at the US, it's all the same language. You're not crossing country boundaries in terms of space. It's a huge space that you've got free access to. So you can look at doing business across the whole of the country very easily. So it seems to be a little bit easier than dealing with languages and everything like that you have in Europe. People see Europe as a place that, a lot of Americans like to go to Europe, and so the outlook on something like Europe is very promising. So there's not such a big impact for European companies to come here. Although things are changing under the Trump administration. Things are changing in terms of additional regulations and things like that. So I'm not sure if it's quite as easy as what it used to be. But again, European companies are looked highly upon. So I think that's definitely an advantage to coming from sort of Asia or something like that. You've got to have a quality product. You've got to have recognise that you have a market here. And the nice part is the US market is so big. So there's a lot of people with similar types of products can all work in the same space because of the size of the opportunity. So it's definitely worth coming here and making sure you can sell your product here, and you'll find a lot of opportunity. I mean, overall, location can be important based on the type of business that you're doing. Georgia's an interesting place in that the cost of living and things like that. So from an employee point of view, more than just a market space, it's a little bit easier to live here. It's less expensive than living on the West Coast, say. That sort of thing. So there's some opportunities here and there's some very talented people here. It's especially in Georgia, if you're in the IT industry, it's a very big hub for IT. And also, funny enough, now it's becoming a very big hub for the movie industry as well. So, it's growing a lot too. The amount of growth in Atlanta over the last 10 years has been amazing. So there's a lot of, and for certain businesses, Georgia offers tax incentives, but for us, most of our business is everywhere else in the US. So location hasn't been a key factor for our particular business because we deal right across the US. So Georgia might be good for certain types of organisations because, again, people like banking organisations, their head offices and that sort of thing are all over the US. So we have some, who are in the south, some are in the west, and that sort of thing. So it really just depends on what you need. Tax regulations and the way things are set up are a lot different from what's in Europe. It's a lot less controlled, I think, if you look at it in terms of regulations, and especially for things like employees and things like that. So there's different aspects of it. Like here in Georgia, if you're working with companies in Georgia and we're selling to Georgian companies, then we'd have to pay things like state tax. But when we're selling to companies outside of Georgia where we don't have an office, you don't have to pay state tax, you know, from terms of a sale. So that makes it a little bit different from, you know, it really depends on how you sell or what your business is as to how the regulations affect you. But again, it's research in terms of understanding what you know, how that's going to affect your particular business. I mean, and even working conditions here in the US is a lot different from Europe. So there's like if you go to the West Coast, somewhere like California has some very stringent laws about labour and enforcing that. And here, somewhere like Georgia, a lot of the regulations fall back to the federal regulations. If you've got a good value proposition, I mean, you've got a market, because possibly you've already looked at what the opportunity to sell your product in the US is. And so, you know, if you know you've got a market and you know you've got a good value proposition, then that will be the first step to being able to get here, because you'll then understand that you need the presence here. And then based on that, you can look at what you can do to expand your business by having a local presence. I mean, for us, it's very difficult, you know, even though it's funny, we don't travel as much as what we used to, you know, things like GoToMeeting and that sort of thing. But then you have to take into effect things like time zones, right, to be able to communicate and support. So we really need to be able to support our customers and have a local presence here. And having a local presence makes companies feel more accepting of what you and your product are, depending on, of course, the type of product you're trying to sell. So those are the sorts of things that you've got to look into before coming here. But there's a lot of opportunity, but at some point, to be able to make the best use of that opportunity, you need to be here and do the work here. In your case, partners are really important to us, because when you start out and you don't have a lot of people, to be able to expand your presence and get recognition, it's very important to have partners who have a local presence and already have a sales force or support, or, you know, all of those, and relationships with customers. So that's something we did very early on, because from Julio Oliveras' side, when he was, you know, with IBM, he saw the value of doing those sorts of things. So it was very important to us to have a good partner base, and we actually partnered with people like IBM to help us with our product into larger organisations. So those sorts of things are really important, because it gave us a greater force of people than we had if we had have just been ourselves trying to knock on doors. It worked out really well, because we had, you know, a partner that was selling our product and had a good relationship with. And then as we saw that they had a good customer base, they weren't exactly in the right sort of businesses that we wanted to get into. They were doing a lot more sort of on the manufacturing side, and we hadn't really made a big impact on the financial services side of things. So, but it gave us a good base. It gave us a skilled set of people. It gave us opportunity with existing markets, so it was existing revenue. And then it gave us the ability to expand out with people who already knew our solution. So we had a support team. We had, you know, people that we needed to be able to help us expand what we needed to do.